The weather is going to be extremely different in January, as we are going to be dealing with a huge weather pattern change as we head into the new year, and this is going to lead to a big Arctic blast, and then following that we are expecting a good amount of snowfall across the United States, and especially more than what we've seen so far this December. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about this big weather pattern change that'll be happening over the next few weeks, and why we think there will be a lot more snowfall in the first few weeks of January, and we'll also be talking about the potential for a tornado outbreak today in the southern plains and the lower Mississippi Valley later in the forecast. We'll begin with what's happening across the country this morning to kind of give you an idea of what the weather pattern is right now. And so for right now, we have this big atmospheric river event that is currently happening along the west coast of the United States. This has been very common, by the way, over the last couple of weeks, where tons of rainfall has been moving into areas like California, Nevada, Oregon, and as well as Washington. And this has been a big trend. Now, this will change as we go into early January, which is one of the reasons why we think we're going to see such a big weather pattern change, because right now we have a very strong Pacific Ocean jet stream, and that will change as we go into the first couple weeks of January. Now, back across the rest of the United States, we do have a trough that is moving over the Rocky Mountains. This actually could bring a few tornadoes to areas like Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and maybe even Oklahoma later today, and we're going to talk about this at the tail end of today's forecast, so if you want to check that out, it'll be later in the forecast. Timestamp should be in the description below. Definitely an event that we are watching for very closely, and there's a chance that we do go live for this on the channel, so make sure to subscribe down below and click the bell icon so you're notified if we do go live later today. So this right here is the weather pattern that we're currently dealing with across North America. Very strong Pacific Ocean jet stream, which is continuing to bring tons of rainfall to the west coast of the United States. We also have a trough that is right now moving across the Great Plains that could bring some severe weather today to the southern plains and the lower Mississippi Valley. This is pretty typical, I would say, more for early December, so we're seeing this a little bit late in my opinion, but even then, this will continue to bring the potential for several storm systems before the end of 2024, and we'll talk more about that here in a moment. Most of those, though, will just be rain, severe weather, and maybe a little bit of snowfall. It really changes, though, as we go into the new year, where we're going to be seeing a completely different weather pattern, where cold air is going to be building across much of Canada, and once this builds up, we are expecting this to release as we go into the first week of January. You'll see that we're going to get this big, very strong northerly and northwesterly flow sometime around the first week of January, sometime around the 3rd or 5th, that I would say is probably when we'll end up seeing this, and this will basically usher out a ton of cold air out of Canada, and this will be one of several shots of cold air that we expect. We think we're going to have another big one sometime during the second week of January, and so on and so forth, and this will also bring the potential for some large-scale storms that could end up being winter storms that bring tons of snowfall. Now, this is what the temperature trend looks like for the next few weeks, beginning with what we're looking at over the next few days until the end of 2024. Just look at all of this warm air building up across almost all of Canada and as well as the United States. The only cold air that's at least below average is really going to be centered back over near Alaska, and then also back over west of California, where the atmospheric river events have been occurring. But look at this, as we go into the new year, we're at least going to get one shot of cold air, I'd say, sometime in the first few days of 2025, but eventually a more serious Arctic blast would likely pursue that sometime around the second week of January. Now, obviously, timing and intensity of this is very difficult to predict, as we are talking about something that is still over a week out from now. And actually, in fact, this is about 2 to 2.5 weeks from now. But with that said, temperature trends are a little bit easier to predict, and the Climate Prediction Center, which is pretty accurate when it comes to forecasting, is also thinking that we are at least going to see a higher likelihood of below average temperatures essentially across almost the entire United States, at least from the northern plains back through the southeast, and as well as across the entire Great Plains. So definitely a trend that we are going to be watching for very closely. Again, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. We'll continue to keep you posted with the latest as we go into January, as I do think it's going to be a very interesting month when it comes to the weather, including lots of snow and also the potential for some big Arctic blasts. Now, speaking of snow, let's kind of break down the future radar here for the next few weeks and give you an idea of what we actually might end up seeing here on the radar, including the potential for snow, severe weather, and as well as rain, beginning with the next few days. So throughout the rest of 2024, we'll have this one storm system bring a little bit of severe weather to the southern plains and the lower Mississippi Valley today. Eventually, as we go into tomorrow and Saturday, that rain will move into the Midwest and up and down the east coast of the United States. By the time we go into Saturday into Sunday, we'll have another storm system move into the Ohio Valley and as well as the Dixie Alley. Might even see some severe weather out of this one as well, back over near Tennessee, and then back into the lower lower Mississippi Valley Saturday and maybe early Sunday. As we go into Monday into Tuesday, that's when things do become a little bit more uncertain. We'll likely have another storm system move into the Midwest and the Ohio Valley with mostly rain, but maybe a little bit of snowfall as well. But again, as we go into 2025, I think things get really interesting. At least for the first few days, it doesn't appear as if we're going to have any big winter storms, but again, that's subject to change. Right now, the GFS model long-term is indicating that we could start to see some bigger winter storms, and these will be the ones that we really have to watch for closely, because these can bring the potential for blizzard-like conditions and also the threat for ice storms. Now, I'm not saying we're definitely going to see this anywhere. Take this with a grain of salt, this particular picture, because obviously this is very far out and things are definitely going to change, but at least gives you a representation here of what we might see in the first couple of weeks of January. I still really think that we are really just kind of pushing the edge right now into winter. We have yet to really see the real impact of winter here across much of the United States, especially since almost everybody has been above average when it comes to temperatures for the last few weeks. And just touching more on the subject about snow, this is what the GFS model shows in terms of accumulation of snow through about the 31st of this year, so basically through the end of 2024. Again, notice the majority of the snow is expected to be in areas like the Pacific Northwest and Canada, not really much elsewhere. This is what the GFS model shows all the way through the 11th of January. And again, take this with a grain of salt. This is just one computer model and it changes all the time, especially long term. But it does again indicate that there's a pretty good chance that we're going to see at least some level of snowfall across parts of the central and northern plains, Midwest, and the Ohio Valley. This is the probability of seeing greater than 1 inch of snowfall over a 24-hour period. So just going day by day, you'll notice again, there's not really much of a chance through the rest of this year, unless maybe we're getting closer to the New Year's Eve time frame. We might have at least a low-end chance in the Midwest of some snowfall. But notice how those probabilities do gradually climb for much of the United States in the first couple of weeks of January. So again, definitely something to keep in mind. This is obviously something that is still very long-term, so the forecasting accuracy is relatively low. But overall, the general weather pattern that we're going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks will be mostly a heat wave for the next week, followed by more than likely at least one shot of Arctic air, if not multiple, and that should eventually lead to winter storms. Exactly where those winter storms happen, again, remains very uncertain, but I do think in the first couple weeks of January, we are definitely going to see something in terms of snow, and perhaps even some very heavy snow in some areas. This is also the EPS showing, again, the probability of greater than 1 inch of snowfall in a 24-hour period. Again, notice the highest time frames really over the next couple of days, especially in the Pacific Northwest, eventually around New Year's Day. Again, notice how there's some slightly higher probabilities in the Ohio Valley and as well as the Northeast, and then eventually, once we get closer to that second week of January, the probabilities are relatively low, but again, scattered across a very large area. So that's at least indicative here that we will likely start to see a ramp up of snowfall potential as we go into the early to middle portions of January. Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is the threat for severe weather, and that is mostly going to be happening today, but there will also be a risk on Friday and Saturday. There is a pretty good chance that we'll be live later today on the channel, so make sure to subscribe down below and click the bell icon so you're notified if and when we do go live. Right now, there is a slight risk for Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana. Marginal threat that goes all the way back as far west as the Dallas-Fort Worth area and also into central Arkansas. Main concern for today will be damaging winds. This should be pretty scattered overall. There will also be some large to maybe even isolated very large hail out of some of the supercells that try to fire off later today. Main region will be out of the initial supercell, so mostly around and just to the north of Houston. The tornado risk is the one thing that is more elevated today. We do have a 5% tornado risk for much of eastern Texas, western Louisiana, and southwest Arkansas. Honestly, with the current risk that we have outlined, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a 10% tornado risk. It would probably be relatively small, but somewhere down in southeast Texas or even southwest Louisiana. I think Houston is really the area to watch for, and just around that as we go later into the afternoon hours. The tornado threat for today will be mostly maximized in the afternoon hours. There will be a low chance for an isolated tornado just to the south and east of Dallas-Fort Worth and just to the east of San Antonio between about 12 to 4 o'clock. Greatest tornado threat, though, really ramps up between 3 and about 10 o'clock today, in my opinion. I think we'll be really watching for the peak around 5 to 6 here in southeast Texas and perhaps even very far in extreme southwestern Louisiana. And this would be really, again, the quadrant that I'm watching for the closest. We will have storm chasers out there today, so again, if there is a need to go live, we will go live. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. This is around 9 to 10 o'clock, so again, that tornado threat maximized there in southeast Texas, southwest Louisiana. Low tornado risk will continue into the overnight hours into early Friday Friday morning as far east as areas like Mississippi and as well as eastern Louisiana. So timing for today, a few storms will be possible this morning, but after lunchtime is when things really start to ramp up. Low tornado risk around 1 to 2 o'clock here just to the south of Dallas, Fort Worth, and around Houston. And eventually by 3 to 4 o'clock, storms start to ramp up. It's going to be a very messy setup, so there is definitely a chance that this could bust out entirely, meaning that we don't really see any tornadoes, but there's also a chance that we do see a small-scale tornado outbreak, which is why there is concern today. By 6 to 7 o'clock, these storms continue to move east. I think, again, our peak will be between 5 and 8 o'clock for the tornado risk, more than likely seeing multiple supercells here in southeast Texas and southwest Louisiana around 8, 9, 10 o'clock, and then eventually by the overnight hours, this bows out into a linear segment, mostly going to be showers and thunderstorms with a very low tornado risk anytime past midnight. So as a reminder, good chance we'll be live later today, so make sure to subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon so you're notified if and when we do go live.